Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Supporting High Quality Instruction Materials Learning Series, hosted by the New Mexico Public Education Department and Rivet Education. Today's session is Procuring High Quality Professional Learning Services. We know that the summer PD planning season is upon us, and so we want to start with this session in this learning series so that you all have some information and some tips on developing strong service request to procure either high quality instruction materials or professional learning vendors this summer to support you in the 2023-2024 upcoming school year. And so my name is Annie Morrison. I am the co-founder of Rivet Education, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Robin McClellan, our Director of Partnerships. And so she and I will be leading you through today's session. Rivet Education, really our vision is that every educator receives the best resources and support available to provide all students with educational opportunities that they not only want, but also deserve. We contribute to this vision by defining high quality professional learning and creating tools and services that support both state departments of education like New Mexico and local education agencies like school systems across the country, and putting that definition into practice for teachers. And we are so proud to partner with the New Mexico Public Education Department to just support New Mexico's efforts in increasing teachers' access to high quality instruction materials and professional learning. And speaking of the New Mexico Public Education Department, we are joined today by three members of the team, Deb, Birgit, and Anthony, that are joining us today. So at times they may pop in and share some additional context about work that's happening in New Mexico, or even their own experiences related to crafting RFPs and service requests in their career. Okay. So we know that, there's a number of different types of service requests that you all, either those of you that are joining us today from the RECs, or those of you that are LEAs joining us today, that you put out every single year. For today's session, we are going to focus on those that are directly related to either procuring high quality instruction materials or professional learning to support the use of those materials. So we're going to narrow the focus a little bit. So our objectives today are for you all to walk away being able to identify the characteristics and the components of effective service request, and draft stronger service requests for professional learning, and then also to run an effective process, a procurement process that leads to improved teacher practice and student outcomes. We recognize that a lot of these procurement contracts are major investments for you all, and we want to make sure that you are getting the services and materials that you need. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Robin to start off the session by discussing why do strong RFPs even matter, right? Why do these service requests really matter for a teacher and kids? What is their direct impact to instruction happening in classrooms? So Robin, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good to be together. First of all, I just wanted to start with a scenario, and this scenario just shows the importance of what you're learning about today. So imagine this scenario, and it's a true scenario, but I will never call out where it happened. So a state signs into law a requirement for LEAs to adopt high quality ELA materials grounded in the science of reading for the 2024-2025 school year. This actually has just happened in 2 states. So it's absolutely a reality. And I know that New Mexico's been doing this work as well. So after adopting EL, the district in the state puts out an RFP because they know that they have to have professional learning services to support implementation and do it right and well effectively. So unfortunately, though, the RFP was written without concise language. It didn't have clear goals and objectives for the professional learning provider to respond to, and it didn't have a strong rubric. So the RFP was written by a small team also within the district without input from teachers and school leaders. So I'm sure that there are several flags that you're connecting the dots on. So without concise language, without stakeholder input, and a strong rubric that eliminates ineffective, unproven vendors, the district is left with a pool of definitely subpar vendors to choose from that are less than ideal. So after choosing the best vendor that they could from a low quality pool, the district receives subpar professional learning services, which we know is a deal breaker when you're trying to really make change for kids in reading instruction. So as a result, then the teachers aren't skillfully equipped to use the EL curriculum. School leaders are ill-equipped to support them because they don't have that really super strategic, high quality professional learning. And so the train starts going off track. And after a year of disastrous implementation, the district abandons the curriculum and starts the process of looking for a new curriculum all over again. So it's a waste of a lot of time and money, as you know, educators, precious time as well. So it's hypothetical, but it's not unusual. That's why we're here today. The driving force for today's learning is to make sure that we only put the very best professional learning providers in front of our teachers and leaders. Now it's time to zoom in and we get to really look at the face of a child, see how this applies and why it's so important. So I'm sure at the center of our golden circle of why, as Simon Sinek calls it, is the child. So I'm going to read a scenario about lose. This comes from the opportunity myth, which is linked in the slide deck that you'll get as a follow-up. So I want to tell you a little bit about Luz. This is our why. So Luz is an 11th grader who loves to read. In fact, sometimes she doesn't do her homework because she's reading so much outside of school. That's not my daughter. She doesn't either. I'm just saying. She wishes all of her classes were as engaging for her as the books she explores on her own time, which often include fiction, nonfiction, just anything. So her vision of the future isn't quite clear yet. She's an 11th grader. I'm sure that's completely normal, but she thinks teaching might be a possibility. So throughout most of her education, she was a straight A student, perfect attendance. That's until she got to high school. So her freshman year, she started getting D's and C's and ended up the year with a C on her report card. She cried and cried because she didn't know how it happened because it wasn't the trend, in her earlier years. So now she's a junior in high school, which we discussed. Her school serves about 500 students. It's part of a larger high school that was closed for poor performance. So again, you're starting to pick up on these flags, and that poor performing high school is broken into 4 smaller schools. She's really reflective about what happened in her transition to high school. Some of the dip in her grades, she thinks, was because she was unprepared for the challenge of high school classes. She says, quote, "I feel like it was a struggle between the difference between expectations that were given to you in middle school." So she adapted to high school, and with some pressure at home from her father, she raised grades back up to A's and B's, but she also describes the importance of having teachers who not only push her, but also support her. So she says, in biology, there were a lot of words I didn't understand. When I needed help, my teacher didn't really help me. I would ask questions, she would answer them, but they weren't what I wanted, so I would have to go to other students. So sometimes they didn't understand it, so I didn't understand it. So for Luz, getting help when she asks for it is an essential component of success in the classroom. Now, in the second semester of her junior year, just as she's starting to consider college, her grades are starting to slip again. She feels herself disengaging from school more often, apathetic. She's missing positive relationships with teachers that anchor her to school. And she says, if I don't really connect with that teacher, then it's like, why am I in your class? I feel like that's what it is. So, but her experience isn't unique. Countless students across the country are struggling to finish high school ready to succeed in college, career, and life. But why? Today, far too students leave their K-12 experience equipped with the knowledge and skills to succeed in whatever that path might be, college or career, because they're not provided with regular opportunities to engage in meaningful grade level work. I'd love to call up the yellow offset. This is from the Opportunity Myth, which was a vast, huge study of lots of different aspects of the student experience. But this always resonated with me. While 70% of students aspire to careers that require at least 1 year of college, only 17% of those 70% are mastering grade level content that will actually prepare them for college level work. And the missing link is high quality instructional materials, high expectations, and then professional learning to support teachers to get there. We know teachers try and put extreme effort into the work that they're doing, absolutely assuming goodwill of every teacher. But local and state agencies often struggle to pinpoint the issue at the level of detail necessary to enact change. And they don't have strategies necessary to impact students' instructional experience quickly and at scale. They're often unclear. So I normally don't read a slide, but this is a slide that grounds us and so that you are connected with the work that we do at Rivet. So at Rivet Education, this is our core belief. We believe students across the country deserve the kind of instruction that equips them to thrive during their K-12 experience and in the post-secondary path of their choosing. So these, I'm kind of dramatic, but I always like to hone in on those keywords that are compelling. I'm sure you each have keywords that you're connecting with as well, but I would call out deserve. Every child deserves to be equipped, and then equip them to thrive. So not only equip them to get the diploma, but equip them to have the knowledge and skills necessary to thrive. And I love that word, because to me, that just means that's our wish for every child. So Rivet Education believes that every day students have to have the opportunity to build knowledge of the world around them. They know that significantly impacts education, literacy, read meaningful texts, express their ideas verbally and in writing all throughout the whole entire lesson, and then solve complex problems. So how do we ensure that our kiddos get the instruction they need to be successful in college or career, which is our moral imperative? We have to support education leaders in executing strategies and solutions that are most likely to impact the quality of instruction happening in the classroom every day. So there are two major investments that are partners, like peanut butter and jelly. They can't be had without each other. So our solution is the perfect storm of high quality instructional materials and high quality professional learning. One cannot exist without the other. So for students to receive the strongest standards aligned grade level instruction, which they all deserve, we have to put quality instructional materials in the hands of teachers, but we have to support them through high quality professional learning grounded in the use of those materials, cycles of inquiry and improvement, and a focus on student outcomes. I've done the work. I know what a strong partnership these two. Again, one cannot exist without the other. And if you have one and not the other, then you're not going to make change for kids. That's why the RFP process, getting back to our grounding work, is so vitally important, because we have to procure the very best for our teachers and students in this interconnected equation.
Thanks so much, Robin, for establishing the why. I think that's like so important to kind of just like lay out like, why do we do this? Because I think all too often making the connection between service requests or contracts and the instruction happening in classrooms a lot of times might seem disconnected, but they're not. And so I really appreciate you kind of giving those real life examples and like meeting Luz and making it a little bit more real for us today. That being said, now that we kind of have a why and why like these types of service requests really matter in influencing instruction in classrooms, I'd love to tell you kind of like, what are strong service requests? And so regardless of what you call them, I know in different states, we call them different things, whether it's like a request for proposal, a service request, contract documents, it's easy to underestimate their power. Again, I think we think of them as just like a bureaucratic process sometimes, but they're much more than that. The RFP process from drafting to contracting, we also recognize can really feel overwhelming. Again, it's that bureaucratic process. It's unnecessarily burdensome sometimes. And just getting the RFP out the door can feel like a huge win. But one of the things we want to zero in today on is that like quality really matters for teachers and kids with these service requests. When done well, RFPs are an important lever that education leaders can use to provide more effective support to teachers and to improve student outcomes. Yet 1 in 3 RFPs that Rivet reviewed in 2022 were ineffective. And so I wanted to just kind of like share a little bit like when we were reviewing all these RFPs, what were some of the common characteristics we saw of those that were low quality? So according to our research, low quality RFPs have scopes of work or outcomes that are not well defined. They resulting in unclear expectations of what services need to be provided and what success looks like for the LEA. They also have unclear information about how many teachers and leaders will need to participate in the professional learning sessions, leading to an inadequate number of facilitators in the proposed scope of work, and most importantly, like an inadequate budget. And then finally, that budget piece, like budgets, we saw a lot of budgets that like weren't even named. So it left the proposers guessing on how much money the LEA or like a regional service center had to support the work. Which again, like we encourage, we believe we're one of those organizations that believe in being transparent when you're hiring someone about the salary requirements, right? You don't want people like to waste their time applying for a job that is in like a salary range that is like too low for them. You should think of RFPs or service requests in the same way. Like be transparent about the budget that you have. I promise it's going to lead to a more like concrete and effective proposal and services in the long run. And finally, give providers enough time to craft a quality response. I know a lot of times with the RFP process, it's like there's a lot of like, hurry, hurry, get it out. And we have to hurry and like get bids back in because we have training that starts in a month. But I think all too often, what that results in is the best professional learning organizations or the best publishers in the country are busy. And they may not have time then to respond to your RFP if there's a really quick turnaround. And right out of the gate, you're eliminating some really high quality providers from your pool of proposals. And so we really do encourage like giving at least 30 days here. So now that we've taken a quick look at like poor RFPs and, again, reestablishing that poor RFPs increase the likelihood of low quality bids from unqualified providers, I'd love to flip the coin here and show what strong RFPs can offer you. With strong RFPs, you're going to have a higher quality vendor pool. It's going to lead to more effective use of your time and money. And ultimately, what you're all striving for is strong results for students and teachers. So let's look at the characteristics of what makes an RFP strong. We recognize that every RFP should reflect your local context. There is going to be considerations at the local level that like will impact, your service request. But regardless of that local context, what we have at Rivet have identified is a set of like common characteristics of strong RFPs. So first, a strong RFP should describe a clear vision for instruction in classrooms across your systems and how either your instructional materials or the professional learning services that you're procuring should support that vision. Again, whoever's bidding on this needs to know what your ELA vision is, what your math vision is, so that they're putting the best proposal together for you. They should also clearly define the goals that you're trying to achieve with this service request. What is the problem that you were trying to solve for through a contract with an outside vendor? They should demand high quality, effective materials and professional learning that address the needs of educators at every level of the system, especially if you're procuring high quality professional learning. Don't forget about your building leaders. All too often, we just think about teachers needing this professional learning, but really those leaders in particular really do need a lot of support, especially if you're adopting a new high quality curriculum. These materials are new to them too. So don't forget about your leaders and making sure that you're really demanding high quality professional learning across your system. They prioritize capacity building. These vendors are not meant to be there indefinitely, right? They should have a gradual release plan in place so that they are building your capacity to support the work at the end of the contract. So that is something you should be asking for in your service request and should be also demanding in your contract. They should also set the expectation that professional learning should address the needs of educators at every level of the system, from teachers, again, from school and building district leaders. These needs vary. There's cultural needs that need to be taken into consideration. There's experience needs. All of those types of things should be taken into consideration. And finally, they should prioritize sustainability by requiring your providers to commit to, again, building professional learning services that is deeply connected to the content and instruction materials that educators are using in their classrooms.
Annie, Deb has her hand raised to ask a quick question.
Yeah, sure, Deb. Go ahead. Let me get you to unmute.
I found the unmute button. It was hidden. I just wanted to emphasize that those strong components of the RFP or RFA, whatever it is you're calling it, should be that strong no matter what the budget is. If it's a $1,000 budget or a $100,000 budget, that those components should be the same and the expectation should be that you get high quality. That's all.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. Absolutely, Deb. Yep. From the smallest of contracts to the largest of contracts, regardless, all of these characteristics should be in place. Yep. Thank you for adding that. So now that we've taken a look at some of the characteristics of strong professional learning, I wanted to take a look at like how to put together a strong service request. So we've defined like what a strong service request is. Let's look at the components of a strong service request. So I'm not going to go through all the components of of service requests or RFPs. I know that like every LEA might have their own different like boilerplate template that they use here. But I do think that there are 6 sections in particular that have the highest impact in ensuring that you are getting the high quality proposals from potential vendors. And so the first 2 that I wanted to cover are the introduction and background context. This is quickly where you say what you want and who you are. The introduction is just a quick summary of the RFP. It's like an abridged version, basically, of your like scope of work. The background context, though, this is a piece that I think people see this as like a little too literal sometimes. And so I think sometimes when LEAs or regional support centers put together the background context, they're like, this is how many students our district has. This is how many, this is the demographic makeup of that. We are located here, and that's it. But I would really push you all to think about this background text a little bit more broadly. This is where you provide the information that potential providers need to put the best proposal together for you. So things that you should take into consideration here is like, again, in addition to the size and composition of your LEA or your REC, like again, that vision piece. What is your vision for teaching and learning in classroom instruction? Where are you in your instructional materials journey? Or is this like, have you newly adopted? Have you adopted a couple years ago and you're struggling? Like, where are you in that journey? Again, that problem you're seeking to solve, name that problem for them. Again, these people are experts. And so I think a lot of times in these proposals, they'll really help you think through some innovative ways to solve that problem. Again, like laying out for them any like current initiatives that may impact the work that you're seeking to procure with them, or past initiatives that may need to be considered that may influence this current contract. So any and all projects that really could influence this work, you should spell that out for them. Especially if you're, procuring professional learning services, any past professional learning that teachers have received. So if and using Robin's example earlier, the district that adopted EL, like it'd be important to know if like teachers have already gone through letters training, for example, before launching EL, right? Like that's helpful context for the professional learning providers to know. Or if you've done a deep dive into the ELA shifts with your teachers, that's helpful context. So think about this background context a little bit more broadly than just like a quick overview of your LEA. Again, it's really about providing providers with the information they need to put together the best proposal for you. These next 2 sections are really the heart of the RFP. This is where you define what you want and how you're going to hold vendors accountable for the work. So it's the goals and outcomes section and the scope of work section. For the goals and outcomes, once you've awarded your RFP to your vendor or publisher, I think you can use that contracting process to refine the outcomes-based measures that you want to put in place in your contract. But we would also encourage you to put those in your RFP as well. This is a place where you really want to specifically define what you're going to hold this vendor accountable for. What do you want to be true at the end of this service agreement? What are the very specific like deliverables you're going to hold them accountable to? So for example, one of the like goals or outcomes will be, this vendor will provide 100 first, second, and third grade teachers with a 5-day training on EL that orients them to like the approach and design of EL, and equips them to like internalize units and lessons and effectively plan for the first unit in EL. That's a very specific, concrete outcome that you would put into this RFP so that the vendors know what they're being held accountable to. With the scope of work, again, this is the real meat of your RFP. It's your opportunity to define the services and deliverables you're expecting, and the timeline for doing so in particular. That timeline piece is important. I think all too often in our review of RFPs, we see that piece left out. The only timeline that mostly is included in RFPs is the timeline for submitting the RFP itself. And they leave out the details of like when they're wanting these services to be laid out. And so don't forget about that in your scope of work. Again, like you are wanting to clearly communicate the expectations of and the deliverables here that you want them to do, so that they can make sure that the proposal they're putting together for you is going to achieve those goals and outcomes. Okay. And so finally, I think if you all in here too, in this area, if you have a specific format for how you want professional learning delivered, or how you want your materials, like if it's important that they have a digital component, those types of things, again, put that in your scope of work. As much detail here, the better. And again, here, and I didn't mention this on the last slide, we put some reflection questions in here to help you all craft these particular sessions. So some of the things you should be thinking about as you're developing these particular components of your RFP. And then finally, these last two sections are really what separates the wheat from chaff in your proposals. They are how the components you put in your RFP to ensure you are getting the materials or services that you really want and that your students and teachers need. So the first is the scoring methodology, your rubric. One, we would strongly encourage you that this rubric is created in conjunction with your review committee, rather than just like creating it in isolation and handing it to your review committee after the fact. We encourage you to allow everyone who is going to be reviewing these RFPs to weigh in on the criteria for which they are going to conduct these reviews. And so there's a lot of criteria that you can consider adding into your RFP. Sorry, I'm going to take 1 second. Robot vacuum has decided to kick on. So there's a lot of component criteria that you can consider here. There's a few that I want to call out that we recommend you including in your rubric. I think all too often, too much weight is put on like cost or other factors, but I think there's some pieces in here that like, again, help you to get really high quality services here. First is like to include a part of your rubric to check providers' understanding of the project, the goals, the outcomes. Have them restate for you your scope of work to make sure that they are clear in what you are asking for. Two, again, the quality of their services and deliverables. Have them like describe in detail, again, what are they going to provide for you? And even ask them to provide details about how they've provided those similar services to other clients and the outcomes of those services, right? Have them prove that they are good at doing what they say they're going to do in your proposal. And then finally, staff qualifications. You and I all know that the facilitator matters. And so what I would want to know from these potential vendors is not only who would be doing the work, but like, what is your process for training facilitators? So if you are providing EL education training to my teachers, I want to know how you're making sure your facilitators are experts in EL. They can't just be an ELA content expert. They need to be an expert on EL. They need to know that curriculum inside and out. And so here's a place in the rubric too, where you were asking them to like define their process for training up their facilitators so that you are confident in knowing they have the expertise that they need. And again, the provider qualifications here, this is really where you should like align these qualifications with your rubric. So again, if your scoring methodology is going to ask questions about how you train facilitators and determine their expertise, one of your provider qualifications should be that they are an expert in EL, and your rubric assesses for that expertise. One of the things you could do here is like require that they submit references for like districts or other organizations that they've worked with in a similar like size and scope of work related to this contract to prove again their expertise here. If like having experience in delivering like science of reading based training is important, put that in these qualifications here. This is where you're going to like hold these providers' feet to the fire for those things that matter the most for you in your contract. Okay. So I've given you a lot of information and I recognize that. And so Robin is going to drop 2 links into the chat for you. So we're going to do a little bit of practice because we've just talked a lot about like, how are we defining high quality RFPs or service requests? And then what are the components of strong service requests? But we really want to like give you a chance to kind of put that into practice. And so in the chat, Robin is going to drop in a link to an RFP. This is an actual RFP that Rivet has reviewed before. And so we want you to quickly skim this RFP. We're going to take about 10 minutes to do this. Don't read it word for word, just skim through the RFP. I think it's about 15 pages or so. So you're not going to have time to read it word for word. Skim through it. And then we want you to reflect on the following questions. And Robin, the second chat link that Robin is dropping into the chat is a note catcher that you all can use. When you click on that link, it's going to automatically force you to make a copy. So it's your own independent note catcher. No one can see that but you. And so take notes as you will. But as you're reviewing the RFP, I'd like for you to reflect on these 3 questions here that you see on the screen. Does the RFP reflect the characteristics of a strong service request? So based on what we've just discussed, looking at the characteristics and components of a strong service request, and we've put those at the top of the note catcher so you have them for easy reference. Is this RFP you're reviewing strong in your opinion? Then secondly, which of the components of this RFP are you like, oh, we do that we do that well? Like, are you seeing some similarities between this service request and service requests that you all have put out, either again at the REC level or LEA level? And then are there components of this service request that you're like, that's a really good idea. We don't currently ask for that in our service request, or we don't address this at all in our service request, and maybe we should start considering it. Like, where are there some components of the service request that you would love to like steal some ideas from? And so again, I think Robin. Oh, my apologies, Robin, can you check on that? Yep, we're working on that. It should be allowing everybody to make a quick copy.
Give me just a second. I'm working on it.
Yep. And in the meantime, guys, if you want to just like drop your email in the chat too, in case we just need to like go that route, but I apologize. We're working on that real quick. Thanks, Valerie. It should open up and automatically ask you to make a copy. So I apologize if it's not letting you do that. Okay. Is everyone able to access the RFP itself? So it looks, so at least for now, start reviewing that RFP. So start skimming that. Because again, I want us to take about 10 minutes here to go through that. And then in the meantime, Robin will get that note catcher available to you, and we'll just put it in the chat once it's working. Okay, I think everyone should have access now. If for some reason you don't, again, our apologies, just like if you have able to just like jot some of your reflections or take some notes to these 3 questions. I want everybody to take about 5 more minutes to review through that RFP. And then after you've done so and you've reflected on these questions, I'd love for you to like kind of drop in the chat like one of your like key takeaways from this. So you don't have to necessarily respond to all 3 questions in the chat, but like of these 3 questions, like if which of these would you want to respond to, and drop some of those responses in the chat. Okay. Everyone take just 1 more minute. Again, would love for some quick reflections in the chat, or we can come off mute in a minute too, and everybody can kind of share some of their takeaways from this. Okay, well, I hope everybody had a chance to look through the RFP and take a moment to kind of reflect on it. Would love just like, again, those of you come off mute or, share just again, some quick reflections that you may have. Gina, Toby, Valerie, any of you guys want to quick reflections, or even some of those of you from the New Mexico team. I know many of you have put out countless RFPs in the past as well, to see like what about this RFP stood out to you? What about it seemed missing based on like what we've learned? Yeah, sure. Valerie, go ahead.
I would just say one of the things that we've learned and that I see as I skim that might be missing in this RFP is around the building of the understanding of the vision and why we do what we do when you adopt the materials, and not just based on who has the coolest looking abundance of resources.
Yep. That's a great reflection. And I'm curious to know, is that something like that your REC, do y'all typically help districts establish that vision, or is that something districts are usually, or LEAs are usually creating on their own in your work with them, or is that like a service that you all offer?
That's actually something that they do on their own based on their district needs, but we've learned a lot this year about that. So we're hoping to be a little more instrumental in helping them have a clearer understanding of that cycle of the adoption moving forward.
Yep. Yeah, I think that vision piece is so important that it keeps everyone on the same page, that when anyone walks into an ELA classroom, regardless of their role in the school system, that it should be clear to them what they should be seeing, right? Like it should be, what are students doing in that classroom? What are teachers doing in that classroom? That vision should be clear. Or be reflected in the instruction happening in those classrooms. Because again, I think it gives everybody kind of that like foundational set of look-fors to know if like across grade levels, across classrooms, within grade levels, like are people providing equitable instruction across those classrooms, as long as everyone is working towards that common vision. Yep.
I love that point too, because even I worked in Sumner County Schools a little bit with that team, and they had in huge print on their professional learning wall, willy-nilly doesn't work here. And it's the same kind of thing. Like if you ground in a vision that really is focused and concrete and reflects the core values, even though we used to talk about vision when we were doing school improvement planning, and everybody had to have a vision. It's very different. Like, what is our vision of excellent literacy instruction? Just like Annie said, how does it tangibly look? We have to select the very best to be able to get us to that destination.
Yep. Thanks, Robin. And if you weren't able to guess it yet by her accent, Robin is a Tennessee educator. So she was in classrooms in a district school and district leader in Tennessee and Sumner County for many, many years.
Toby, can you unpack just a little bit about, okay, let's say it didn't articulate a clear pathway to build capacity within training. Could you just talk a little bit about, unpack that a little bit as far as what you mean about capacity within training?
Yes, for sure. I just think like when I think really those goals, outcomes, like some of that they talked about having that professional development piece in there, but really it was not necessarily clear, concise, or very specific as to what that would look like or what the process would be moving forward in that. So to say, is it a year-long process? After so many sessions, is it going to look to like a train the trainer type model, or what is that going to look like within the PD within that? Or is it kind of what we talked about in the beginning, where it is, you receive that professional development. It's like, oh, here's how you open the book and here's all the resources. Thank you. Good luck. Have a good year. And so it's how do we ensure that our teaching staff and our administrators and everyone is able to access the resources, but also be able to implement those resources effectively.
Do you feel like, Toby, New Mexico's in a different place now as far as the understanding of high quality instructional materials, the understanding of really tight professional learning?
I do feel like there's been a lot of strides taken to move forward in that for sure. But again, I think it's our LEAs being able to have those conversations with publishing companies and just being able to articulate that well and actually evaluate and have that clear vision. Ties back to what Val was saying with that vision of how do we connect that and make sure that we're articulating things in a manner and asking for what specific things we actually need for our districts versus what can you give us, we telling them this is what we need from you, how can you do that?
Great, wonderful. Well, I want to be conscious of time. And so I thank you guys so much for your reflections here. I'm going to move us along to let Robin cover a little bit of like just a little bit about the procurement process itself. I think there's a couple like key tips here we wanted to share with you all today before we kind of wrap up this session as well. So Robin, I'll turn it over to you at this point to talk through some of the steps to an effective procurement process.
Thank you, Annie. Love the conversation too that we had, even though be it brief. So you've learned about characteristics of components of strong RFPs. Now we're going to talk about the steps. So there's 3 steps really that often people miss or not really hone in and provide a lot of attention to. So I'm just going to quickly go over those 3. First of all, define the RFP purpose, objectives, and budget. You just want to make sure you're clearly and succinctly defining what it is you want to accomplish through that project. So what will be true by the end of it? What problem are you trying to solve? And why will partnering with an outside vendor really be important to the success of the implementation? And then I think you guys have talked to this a little bit already.
First, and sorry to interrupt, Robin. I just want to be clear,
That's okay.
like that's step 1 for a reason. You should not start drafting your RFP until those things are defined, because how are you going to know at the end of the process if like you created an RFP to meet those objectives if they haven't been established from the very beginning? So sorry to interrupt there. I just want to like,
No,
that's number 1.
foundation for the fitters build the house. That's what we always talk about.
Yep.
Annie gets started my analogies, but anyway. So then like talk about the identify and invest stakeholders in the process. So I'm not going to go over, about stakeholder involvement and how a project can fly or fail if you don't get voice into the table. So you not only want to include people that are actually responsible for doing the work, but you want to include the gatekeepers, the people who are holding the budgetary strings, people who have authority to red or green light this, people you'll need support from. And so then of course we know that the vertical spine of stakeholders is Premier ELA is, teachers, instructional coaches, leaders, directors of PD. It's that vertical spine of voice. And then also state or local school boards, because often we know that everything has to be aligned with the mission and vision of those bodies as well. So finally, this is super key, is onboard your vendor. So after you sign the contract with your vendor, you need to hold a kickoff meeting with a very detailed scope of services to make sure that their project plan is aligned with exactly your destination. And so Rivet has a great tool called Steps to Selecting a High Quality Professional Learning Partner. It's in our professional learning partner guide, which is free for access. Lots of very important, great information about partnering with vendors. And that'll give you some additional guidance on your kickoff meetings.
Yep.
We're not going to have time. Sure. We're not going to have time for the
Yeah.
discussion on this next slide, but just something to think about. I love the transparency of this group, just making sure that you take these think abouts back to your teams and back to thinking about how is it that we build this strong RFP in service of impacting students. So you have the list of what the steps are that it takes and the characteristics. So just think about where have you skipped or struggled some of those steps, like some of the ones maybe that I highlighted on the slide before, and maybe that has impacted the quality of services that you received. And then which steps are you going to prioritize? So thinking about this, going back to your teams and taking this information back, how do we take lessons learned throughout this time and really polish to make stronger RFPs? So we would love for you to go back and have those conversations. The last 2 slides, I'm not going to read these each one, but just pulling out a couple of points. The RFP guide gives you, great tips on how to write effective professional RFPs. And then we have a request for proposal template. And that's actually a template you can draft, and you can see specific examples of goals, objectives, what they look like. What do partner requirements or qualifications look like? It's real for me. It's always good to see the destination in mind and to be able to work toward that. The New Mexico marketplace vendor marketplace document that most updated is listed there. And then professional learning partner guide and guidebook. That's where Rivet has pulled together lots of experts who come and look at all of the professional learning providers, and are they deep in curriculum? Are they deep in pedagogy? And what does their training look like as far as supporting teachers, leaders, and then ongoing work with, again, the vertical spine of the district. The guidebook has great ways for selecting, organizing, managing vendors, information about onboarding. And then being released tomorrow is really exciting, is Rivet Connect. So it's a one-stop shop for support. So that means if you need help writing RFPs, there are resources in there that you can connect to, Rivet Connect, and other ways to support teachers with curriculum-based professional learning. So you can check that out at the link when you get the slide deck. And then the last information is about upcoming webinars. Session 1 of our learning series is now complete. We love our collaboration with New Mexico, and the work that you guys are doing is innovative and it's right for kids. And I think you should be excited about movement. Just don't forget to register for our upcoming sessions. Session 4 is for RECs only, but we would love to have our district representatives and please spread the word about this work in session 2 and 3. So make sure you go to register for those, and we would love to have you back with us. Annie, there is one question in chat.
Yep.
Or a note from Deb.
Yep.
She says vendors think their service is a
Yes.
gift to you, and then they provide what they think you need. It's important that we
Yep.
drive the contract from beginning to end. Yeah.
Absolutely, Deb. And I think, again, that's why that last step 9 of the procurement process, the vendor onboarding, that is where not only where this is the opportunity for you to norm with your vendor to say, we recognize you're the expert. We're bringing you into our district or to support our multiple districts for a reason. But there are also some things that are this is how we operate here that we would like for you to use, right? So if there is a way that you all observe classrooms, or is there a particular protocol that you use for professional learning, this is a time to share that with your vendor. To Deb's point, you are not at the mercy of that vendor. You are the boss, right? You are you hold the contract. You are the one paying them for their services. And so I think it's I think all too often, we bring these experts in because they are the experts and just think that we automatically have to defer to whatever they say or do. But that vendor onboarding process is a way to have that pushback a little bit with them to say, we recognize that this is how you do things, but actually we prefer to do it here, or normal language. Just something as simple as what they call a certain process for observation and feedback may be different than what you all the language you all use with a district, and that can just create confusion in the field. And so really using that onboard process to have those negotiation with your providers to say here's the things that are non-negotiables for us that we insist that you use as part of this contract. Again, that's a great place to put that in those provider qualifications on the very front end. But again, also recognize they are an expert. So sometimes they are going to have things that they want to do that are just tried and true and proven to be effective, that you may need to give and have some reflection on your point to say I know we've always done it this way, but maybe it's time to make a change here too. So yeah, thank you for calling that out, Deb. I appreciate it. And again, if you have questions here, Robin, if you all have questions for Rivet, Robin's email is listed here. Again, specific about how we define high quality professional learning, or some of the tools like the RFP guide or template or Rivet Connect that we've mentioned today. Or if you have questions specific to the New Mexico Public Education Department, either about some of the state's initiatives around high quality instruction materials and professional learning, or more about this learning series, please reach out to Deb. As Robin said, we hope you encourage your colleagues and other RECs and your LEAs to join us for the upcoming 2 sessions about where we'll do a deep dive into what are high quality instruction materials and what is the impact that they have on teachers and kids. Why do teachers and kids deserve them? And then we'll take a deep dive into high quality curriculum based professional learning. why like these materials really require a fundamental shift in teacher practice. And what does that mean for the professional learning that teachers need and deserve to use those materials skillfully? So we hope you guys will come back and bring some friends in August. But until then, again, reach out to Robin or Deb if you have questions, and we look forward to seeing you all at the start of the 2023-24 school year. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it.